Everyone, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Boston Greeks podcast. We have a very interesting, amazing, cool, and I found out recently, somewhat connected guest. We're going to get to know a little bit more about her, but let me introduce my co-host, Foti Stamos. How are you, Foti?
I'm well in yourself, Ari. I love the enthusiasm in your voice on
Yeah,
every
I mean,
episode.
we were speaking right before we got on, and we talk about Greeks and the history, and then we make the connections, and that's what it's all about with our culture. I love these facts, and without getting too far along, let's bring on our amazing guest today.
Absolutely. And Ari, for those that are going to hear this name, definitely know our guest. And for those that haven't heard her name, should definitely know who she is. We want to welcome to the Boston Greeks podcast, the editor-in-chief of the Hellenic Chronicle and more, which we'll discuss, is Nancy Agris Savage. Thank you so much for joining us on the Boston Greeks podcast. It's an honor to have you on.
It's an honor to be with all of you, and no better words that come together than Boston and Greeks.
That's absolutely true. Nancy, we know you are, a busy person, first of all, so thanks again for taking a little bit of time out with us. You have, there's many stories that could cover many, many podcasts. But let's just begin a little bit about your background, your family background, where you're from, where you grew up, and kind of like where we'll get to where you came to be, but a little bit of background for you.
Okay, well, I was born into a journalism family. I guess that's probably the biggest part of the story. My father grew up in Central Square, Cambridge, a member of St. Constantine and Helen. Surrounded by his family there, and my mother grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire, St. George Cathedral, also surrounded by family and very involved in community, both first generation from immigrant parents, that, kind of typical story of that day. Probably the most, I guess, atypical part of my story is that my father seemed to have a drive about him as a young man. He got out of the military, and at 24, went to school and got a degree in journalism from BU. This is like night school through the GI Bill. And he decided he was frustrated by the fact that there were many publications in the United States in Greek for Greeks that had immigrated, but there was nothing for young Greek Americans who were assimilating and who wanted to be in contact and know what others, were doing. Greek Americans, first generation, kind of what, you're doing, connecting Greek Americans through podcasts now. Well, so he decided, the first person he went to was Archbishop Yakovos, who was then Father Koukousis at the cathedral. Oh. And he told him what he wanted to do. And he said, "You're crazy, save your money, start a family and get a real job, because other people have tried to do this." And, so anyway, my father was not to be deterred. He started off, and it stuck. The first place he went, or one of the first places, was to Manchester, New Hampshire. There was a radio station up there, one of the first Greek radio programs, Saturday morning for like a half hour, WFEA, and they played Greek music. And my mother happened to be the DJ because she was the secretary for the radio station. And there was an Italian program and something else. And she one day spoke up and said, "Hey, how come there are a lot of Greeks around here. How come there's no Greek radio program?" And he said, "Okay, show up on Saturday morning with the records." And she said, "No, not me. I was just suggesting it." Anyway, long story, he goes up there to run an ad on the radio program, and the rest is history.
Wow.
And yeah, so the Hellenic Chronicle, I grew up literally in the Hellenic Chronicle offices. My father was in the press room the night I was born. So this is where I grew up. I grew up on Huntington Ave, and then later, as things got better, the offices were on Newbury Street for 40 years.
Wow.
And this is just my life. So I guess fast forward, it wasn't all I wanted my life to be. I had other thoughts about that was my dad's dream, okay, enough of the Greek American community. I definitely, I guess, had the bent for journalism and writing I got from my dad. And so I went off to school in New York, where I had an opportunity to do a internship with Amnesty International. Always been, the 70s were times of human rights violations and anti-war protests and the whole bit. Did an internship with Amnesty International, really got the whole bug, I think, for international affairs, and went to GW, got my master's, and got a job on Capitol Hill. Ended up on the House Foreign Affairs Committee for about 15 years, which was an incredible experience. That's like a whole nother podcast in itself. But just traveled and, so I worked particularly on human rights issues, but I also worked on the Cyprus issue and Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, the whole balance of foreign aid and so forth. So got to know, a lot of folks on that issue as well. And it was something very near and dear to my heart, because when the invasion happened in '74, I was still in high school and I was still working at the paper. So obviously, it was a huge deal for the Greek American community here. Literally that one event was the birth of the Greek lobby, as it's referred to. Another subject for a whole other. Keep taking notes, guys. I'll give you all kinds of. Anyhow, so so all is going well, and I had intended to stay in Washington, despite my poor father's disappointment. So unfortunately, he was diagnosed with cancer at 60.
Oh gosh.
A guy who was just really did all the right things before they were talking about all the right things. Played tennis several days a week, and was eating the Mediterranean diet and watching himself and everything else. And we had no history of cancer, and boom, stage 4, and get your affairs in order, and that was pretty much it.
Oh my gosh.
So I came to what was at a pretty young age a crisis of is this about me? Is this about my family? Is this about responsibility? Is this about my heritage? Is this about whatever? The paper was either going to close then or whatever. And so I made the decision. I left Washington. I came back. I took over the paper. Fast forward, got married, had a couple of kids. And those were really heady times here. The Orthodox faith was changing, and you had a lot of people marrying in, a lot of change in English language being brought into churches and how people felt about that. Anyway, it was a very difficult position to be in, to try to balance the work-life Greek mother, wife, daughter thing. And so eventually, on the 50th anniversary of the Hellenic Chronicle, I made the decision. I had several offers to sell it. I decided I did not want to do that, because everybody has their own agenda when they have a publication. So I sold it, and I closed it, excuse me, and so now I freelance, and I speak, and I raise money for Greek American journalists in a scholarship through Alpha Omega, which, as you both know well, was my dad was the founder of, and so that brings us to today.
Yeah, so I definitely want to get into that. But before we get into that, I just want to say, this is a very brief description of everything you mentioned about your dad's life and your life. But I mean, it goes so deep and it affected so much. I mean, that was a staple of I mean, New England, but of much more,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And there was so much to go into it. Obviously, you can't cram a whole life story into a short period. But I just want people to understand, like, this was the young people who maybe just don't know because it was
They weren't
before their time. But like, this was an amazing like time for Greeks here in America. And what your dad did was like such an amazing thing. And he really put like a lot of us in the forefront. And it's meaningful to me as a Greek American, um, especially involved in media and now web and whatnot. But like, he was a trendsetter. He was like it was an amazing thing. And you took it over and you did your thing. And I mean, this is so much like impressive stuff crammed into a small story. I just want people to realize that it just goes so much deeper. But anyway, it's a short podcast. So
Well, that's because we
now,
have to bring Nancy back again.
what was that, Fati?
That only allows us to bring Nancy back many times.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's plenty to talk about, I'm sure. And a guest who's a journalist is a great guest because they definitely can tell a story and can tell us so much about things we know or we don't know. So absolutely. But now you mentioned the scholarships, another amazing thing, an incredible thing for young Greek Americans. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Oh, for sure. For sure. One of my favorite topics. 32 years, $800,000.
Wow.
About 160 young Greek Americans working in media, journalism, communications, really across the board in the United States, overseas. We have people in Athens, we have people in Berlin. Again, all media from documentary film, 60 Minutes, CNN, Fox. Right here locally in Boston, we've got some terrific young people. Peter Eliopoulos, Channel 5, one of my kids.
Wow.
Ariel Metropolis, WMUR, Manchester, one of my kids. So WGBH, Zoe Matthews, executive producer. So, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. And so just keep trying to raise money. I'm very thankful that people in Alpha Omega appreciated my dad's role as the founder of the organization. People like, you guys, would never have known him. This year he's gone 35 years, but he's left behind really a legacy. And I used to call him jokingly the no of networking, because that's what he used to do. And just briefly tell you what networking used to look like in the Hellenic Chronicle days, as opposed to what you guys are doing now. So easy to find Greeks, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what one of my Saturday morning jobs was?
What?
Every time the new phone book would come out, stop it, sit at the kitchen table with a pen and go through and put a dot next to every Greek name. And then
That's so funny.
somebody would, in the office, starting Monday, would start taking the addresses down, and we'd send a free copy of the Hellenic Chronicle. They'd cross-check again,
That
and
is amazing.
yeah, because that's what it was like then.
I love it.
That's what it was like.
That's awesome. He
But he was crazy like that. We would go out of town, and I mean that kind of like brilliant crazy, but still crazy. We'd check into a hotel and he'd pull out the telephone book and start looking for Greeks. And he literally would look for a Greek restaurant and we'd have to go there. I'm like, Dad, once in a while, could we eat something else besides Greek food,
Yeah, but you know what? He got stuff done. Like he executed. He wanted to do something and he did it. That's amazing.
Yeah, there were two kinds of people, really. Greeks and those that he was going to tell why they wanted to be Greek. That's it.
Funny.
There was
Yeah, well,
nobody else on the planet. That's it.
You know,
Oh.
Nancy, you make me you give me like a very interesting thought. I wonder how different my life would have been if I grew up next to your dad instead of his brother. I wonder because that's always been like my thing, and I wonder like what he would have taught me as my neighbor. It would have been an amazing thing.
Yeah, well, so here's the yin and the yang of life, all right? Um, I think you would have been great, and you are great either way. It would have been very different because yes, my father would have told you a lot, but I don't know if you guys have kids or whatever, but when you're busy people and you have busy lives, you lose something there.
Mhm.
Okay. So Despina and Nick, my Uncle John's kids, could sit here and me included because I was another one of Uncle John's kids. That's the only place I ever went for fun in my whole life. Uncle John took me to the Cape. Uncle John took me to the beach when they were going. I never went anywhere fun with my parents.
Yeah.
Well, what's fun? At Alpha Omega dinner, oops, the 50th anniversary of a HEPA, off we go to Worcester or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Come on, So you wouldn't have seen him much is the first thing I'm going to tell you. You would not have
yeah.
seen my father much. And you did see my uncle.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and we all need both of those kinds of role models in our lives, right?
Very much so.
Yeah, so I believe me, I take nothing from my uncle. He was an amazing guy, and
Oh, he definitely was,
equally as proud of his heritage, and yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Sure.
I mean, I love listening to the history. I love listening to anything historical. I love listening to anything with Greeks, and I love everything with Boston. And we kind of got it all right now. And
Well, you guys are carrying on because look, the newspaper business, sorry, just not around. When was the last time you saw a newspaper? So people stop me and say, geez, I wish you still had the Hellenic Chronicle. I'm like, why? Because you're going to subscribe to it and wait a week for your publication to arrive in the mail? I don't think so. So it's either online and, online journalism, it's not the same.
No,
We're
it's not.
having a conversation here. That's what a newspaper was like. Long form journalism is almost dead. Now everything's a sound bite.
Yeah.
5 minute sound bite. There is no conversation.
It's, again, it's one of those things like you can't stop, changes, but it does make me sad sometimes to think of how it used to be and how it is now. But you either adapt or you die. I mean, how else can you put it? It's just one of those things. But
that is it.
At least we
But
did.
you don't forget. You don't forget, and that's the wonderful thing. You don't forget.
Well, that's the thing. Like, at least we have those memories. At least we have what your dad created and what you created, and
and what
better
you
to have loved than lost.
Creating. This will be, forever preserved for people to go back and listen to.
Right.
This is, this is what it's about, and this is what led to the Hellenic Chronicle digitization.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Because the newspapers were just sitting there and bound to volume.
So, what I'm hearing is you're digitizing the Hellenic Chronicle?
It's been done.
Oh my gosh.
All the manual, all 50 years, the manual digitization is done by a guy that I'm hoping you both know. If you don't, there's your next podcast. Only you'd have to do minimum of 3.
Okay.
Even touch Meleti Pouliopoulos.
Oh yeah. We know Meleti.
Okay. I am like, there are not enough things that I can say about what Meleti does. And I don't think anybody really knows. And I encourage you, please, what he is doing to preserve the Greek American history in this country, and I'm talking single-handedly, is incredible. Because I had numbers from these big data corporations to digitize this. $250,000. Where am I going to get that kind of money?
Crazy.
So we raised $50,000 in like a minute.
Bravo.
And so now the question is, where is this archive going to go? Harvard wants it, Princeton wants it, a bunch of other, entities want it, but they won't share it. It's not open and free, and I'm not doing that. I want your kids to be able to jump on there someday and say, I want to find my papu's obituary. I want to find a picture of my grandmother when she was in the Philoptochos, whatever it is, whatever it is. So that's what we're in the process of doing. And Meleti and I jokingly, I'm the pretty face behind the digitization. He's the one who did all the work. He's the guru.
Bravo. Wow. Bravo.
Nancy, you have to keep us posted on the next steps of that. We'd love to hear more about.
I will, absolutely. I will, because it's not the whole experience of Greeks in America, but it's a pretty darn big chunk of it, a really important chunk, the coming of age chapter, I guess I would say, that was going to be forgotten. I donated all 50 volumes like this, full-size leather bound, to the Archbishop Yakovos Library, the special collections room. And they're sitting there, and when I tell you, the pages are crumpling like phyllo dough on the countertop. You could just blow, and they're just, yeah.
Well, you
so
know what?
It had to be done. So
you're doing the right thing, and the total faith that the right person is doing this, and total faith that it will be seen by future generations to understand where their parents, grandparents, great grandparents came from, what they were dealing with, what life was like for the Greek American back then, and such an important thing.
And the advancements that we as a community have made. You think about it, our grandparents and whatnot coming here was like, no Greeks need apply kind of thing. And look where we are as a community now. I mean, it's crazy, the positions that have been, we're at the forefront of everything: politics, law, entertainment, medicine, you name it. We're everywhere.
Wow, Nancy, the story is amazing. There's so much more that obviously, again, time constraints it is, but we would love to have you back whenever you have the time. We love these stories. We live for these stories. And just the fact that I recently found that connection, and it just makes it all the more special for me personally. And we just want to thank you for taking that time with us, and for getting a little tiny bit out there on our podcast. We appreciate it.
And Nancy, if I can also add a mention to thank you for coming on, but also we're going to be seeing you shortly. And maybe in a couple of weeks or less, we're going to see you at the Alpha Omega Gala, right? The honorees. Next week. And for those
where you guys are presenting scholarships to the next generation of journalists, right?
We are presenting 6 scholarships, and one to a local young man, Nick Antonakis, who's interning at WCVB right now, and a great young man, another young woman from out of town who's at Emerson and who's interning at the Greek consulate, Anastasia Petridis, and the other 4 are from across the country. They're all coming to Boston for the dinner with their families, and also just very, very proud to say that our honoree this year, Nick Larigakis, we were from president of American Hellenic Institute, not from Boston, but a phenomenal Greek, doing so much. And Nick and I were kids in Washington together. I've known him for 40 years. He's such a deserving guy. And our emerging leader is one of my former kids, Anthi Mitrakos, who is the editor of Portas magazine and just done so much in the field of communications and trying to connect Greeks and remind young Greek Americans to be proud of their heritage and what it means to them. And, you thank me, I thank you for having me. More importantly, I thank you guys for carrying on the fight. There are not a lot of people doing this. There really are not. And you should be very proud of yourselves. And, I hope you'll keep doing it for a long time. And I also hope that other people will do it in other cities and because this is the medium to which to reach. You're
Right.
basically doing the same thing my dad did in 1950 in
Right.
today's medium.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
Thank you
awesome.
for, thank you for the acknowledgement.
it's so great to hear that. Thank you. And just, a very quick plug is if you want to see all these amazing honorees and all these scholarship recipients in a great night of dining, dancing, entertainment, and fellowship.
Yeah, it's not all speeches.
Yeah.
It's not. In fact, it's very little speeches.
Yeah, no, it's a great time. I've been to a couple and I had
wonderful.
a blast. So
Yeah.
so check out Alpha Omega's website, alphaomegacouncil.org for tickets. As long as before the time passes, and we'll see you over there, Nancy. And we'll talk more. We want to say thank you one more time, Nancy Agris Savage, for all you.